I unalived in a freezing puddle of dirty street water, mocked by the woman who stole my husband and my life, only to wake up in the golden, deceitful sunlight of 2006. They thought they had broken me. But they forgot one thing. A mother who has lost everything is the most dangerous creature on earth. This time, I am the one holding the match. I was intensely shaken awake, my skull rattling against the cheap fabric of our bedroom pillow. My eyes fluttered open, struggling against the blinding morning light, only to be met with the uncomfortably close, youthful face of my husband, Ethan. His short, neatly trimmed hair was perfectly styled, and he was practically vibrating with a manic, irrepressible energy. His eyes were crimson, tinted widened with a feverish excitement, and his hands gripped my shoulders, shaking me with enough force to make my teeth click together. "Joanna, wake up, we struck gold, we're going to be rich. I swear it. Firm clap me, quick, make sure I'm not dreaming," he yelled, his voice cracking with pure greed. For a fraction of a second, the fog of sleep clouded my mind. But then, the memories of the last 15 years, the crushing debt, the cold betrayal, the squeal of the tires, and the agonizing impact of the car, slammed into my chest like a freight train. My hands, resting limply on my lap beneath the duvet, instantly curled into tight, trembling fists. A fiery, breath-depriving rage expanded in my lungs, demanding to be released. Without a single thought of hesitation, I raised my hands left, then right. I swung with every ounce of trauma and hatred I had accumulated over a lifetime of misery. Clap, clap, clap. The two firm claps echoed through the small Brooklyn apartment, like loud reports. The sheer force behind my palms sent a shockwave of numbness up to my elbows. My hands throbbed, swollen and tingling with the impact. The breath-depriving resentment that had been choking my heart for 15 years finally found a tiny, desperate valve to escape through. "You plotted against me, ruined me, and left me to unalive for so many years," I thought. "Consider these two firm claps a minor down payment on the interest you owe me." Ethan stumbled back, his manic smile instantly evaporating into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. He had always known me as Joanna, the gentle, soft-spoken, endlessly compromising wife, who could barely raise her voice in an argument. To him, I had just morphed into a complete stranger. He cupped his rapidly reddening cheeks, his mouth opening and closing like a breath-depriving fish, as he stared at me in disbelief. "Joanna, what the hell is wrong with you?" he stammered. Before I could answer, the clatter of pots and pans in the kitchen ceased. My mother-in-law, Martha, burst through the bedroom door. Strapped to her back, giggling like a little tyrant, was my 5-year-old son, Hunter. He was kicking his legs wildly against Martha's sides, treating the elderly woman like a beast of burden. "Giddy up, Grandma. Let's keep playing horse," Hunter shrieked, entirely oblivious to the tension in the room. Staring at the boy, a cold bucket of reality washed over me. I finally understood the truth. A healthy tree doesn't just rot and collapse overnight. It is hollowed out, millimeter by millimeter, by pests and decay over years of neglect, until a single gentle breeze brings the entire massive structure crashing to the earth. In Martha's deeply traditional, patriarchal eyes, a male heir was the absolute center of the universe, the continuation of the family bloodline, and the ultimate hope for the future. Because of this toxic ideology, she granted Hunter unlimited, boundaryless indulgence. She had spent the first half of her life spoiling her son, Ethan, and now she was dedicating the second half to spoiling her grandson. In my previous life, I had been so utterly consumed by the vicious cycle of working 3 jobs to pay off Ethan's astronomical debts that I had entirely neglected the education and emotional rearing of my children. Without my intervention, Hunter grew into a cruel, arrogant, and unbearably domineering teenager. And my sweet, empathetic daughter Chloe, she was mentally bent and broken by Martha's relentless daily brainwashing, manipulated into becoming nothing more than a lifelong servant to her brother's needs. In my past life, Chloe had dropped out of high school, working grueling minimum wage jobs, just to help Hunter secure a down payment on a luxury condo he didn't deserve. For 15 agonizing years, my life was a tragic joke, And my beautiful daughter was forced to swallow every injustice the world could throw at her. Seeing Ethan's swollen, crimson cheeks, Martha panicked. She hastily untangled Hunter from her back, dumping him on the mattress, and glared at me with eyes bulging with venom. "Joanna, have you lost your damn mind? What in God's name are you doing striking my son?" she shrieked, stepping defensively in front of Ethan, taking his grandmother's cue. Little Hunter grabbed a thick lifestyle magazine off the nightstand and hurled it directly at my chest. "You ugly old woman. I'll unalive you for striking my dad," he yelled, his young face contorted in an ugly sneer. Just then, my 5-year-old daughter, Chloe, stumbled into the room from the hallway. Her tiny hands were clutching a bunch of unwashed celery she had been tasked with cleaning. Her steps were clumsy and hesitant, but she immediately threw her frail little body in front of me, spreading her arms like a shield. "Hunter, no, you can't strike Mommy. It will hurt Mommy," she cried, her voice shaking with fear. "Why would it hurt the old woman?" Hunter scoffed, mimicking Martha's cruel tone perfectly. "Grandma says she has skin as thick as a pig." My heart shattered into a million jagged pieces. I crouched down and pulled Chloe's tiny trembling frame into a desperate embrace. Tears instantly blurred my vision, hot and uncontrollable. "Chloe," I whispered, my voice breaking. She looked at me with massive, terrified eyes, puffed out her chubby little cheeks and blew gently on my forehead. "Blow it away. Blow the pain away. Mommy doesn't hurt anymore," she cooed. "Mommy doesn't hurt. Mommy will never ever let anyone hurt us again," I vowed, burying my face in her soft shoulder. "My sweet innocent girl. In this life, I swear on my soul that I will never let the crushing weight of this family destroy you." I took a deep breath, forcing the intense storm inside my chest to calm. When I looked back up at Ethan, I let the tears spill over my cheeks, adopting the submissive, cowardly persona they were all so used to. "Ethan, didn't you just explicitly tell me to firm clap you?" I stammered, shrinking into myself. "Your expression, your eyes, you looked completely possessed. It scared me half to departure. I thought you were having a seizure or something. I didn't mean to do it so hard, I promise." Ethan, still rubbing his jaw, waved his hand dismissively, his greed quickly overriding his pain. Whatever, I know you didn't mean it." Hunter immediately scrambled across the bed and threw himself into Ethan's arms. "Daddy, does it hurt? Hunter will blow the pain away for you." Ethan beamed, entirely susceptible to the boy's flattery. He scooped Hunter up and spun him around the room in a flying airplane maneuver, filling the room with loud, echoing laughter. Chloe stood beside me, watching them with a heartbreaking look of quiet envy. I tightened my arms around her little body and leaned down, whispering directly into her ear. "Mommy is going to take Chloe to the amusement park next time. We'll ride the big flying elephants, just you and me." Chloe's dull eyes suddenly sparked with a brilliant starlit joy. She looked up at me in disbelief and planted a wet sloppy kiss right on my cheek. Martha, hovering nearby, clapped her hands nervously as Ethan spun. Okay, careful now. Don't drop my precious Hunter. Now, what is all this shouting about? What is the good news?" "Mom, you won't believe it. We are going to be filthy rich," Ethan declared, completely forgetting the stinging welts on his face. "Do you know how much the market jumped today? A massive surge. That tech stock I bought just rallied 15%. I made $400 in a single morning while sitting on the toilet." "Oh, my brilliant son, you are destined for greatness. We need to celebrate with a feast tonight," Martha cheered, before snapping her head toward me, her tone instantly dropping to a frigid bark. "Well, what are you standing around like a mute for? Get your apron on, and go cook dinner." I lowered my eyes, mumbled a quiet obedient okay, and picked Chloe up in my arms. I walked straight into the kitchen, entirely ignoring the pots and pans. I took the celery from Chloe's small hands and threw it directly into the garbage can, kissing her soft cheeks again and again. "My good sweet Chloe, we are going out. Mommy is buying you a feast," I whispered. "But Grandma said Chloe has to wash the vegetables," she replied, looking nervously at the garbage can. "From now on," I said, looking deeply into her eyes, "Chloe only has to listen to Mommy. Understand?" Taking advantage of the chaotic celebratory mood in the living room, where the three of them were loudly fantasizing about luxury cars and mansions. I quietly grabbed my purse, I bundled Chloe into her coat, and slipped out the front door without making a sound. 10 minutes later, we were sitting in a brightly lit McDonald's. A massive portion of a Happy Meal spread out before us, as Chloe happily munched on her golden fries, a rare smile gracing her usually solemn face. My mind plunged into a deep, turbulent sea of calculation and memory. Ethan had always been obsessed with the stock market. He constantly preached that day trading was the single greatest wealth creation tool in human history, the only real weapon the working class had to break the chains of poverty. Over the past few years he had traded obsessively, but the reality was pathetic. After years of staring at charts, his net returns were practically zero. We would have made more money leaving our savings in a standard low-yield bank account. But 2006 was different. The market was accelerating into a historic, blinding bull run. The housing bubble was inflating rapidly, and deregulation acted as a massive catalyst. By late 2006, the momentum was undeniable. Stocks were doubling overnight, defying all logic. This frenzy would continue to climb, peaking in late 2007, with the Dow Jones shattering historical records. During this era, overnight millionaire stopped being a hyperbole. Everyone thought they were a financial genius. From taxi drivers to supermarket cashiers, the entire country was talking about margins, derivatives, and stock splits. It was during this exact manic period that Ethan made his first real bucket of gold. In the beginning, he used the money to improve our lives. The very first thing he did when the cash rolled in was sell our small rent-controlled apartment, a property I had secured through my old public sector job. Combining that money with his new stock market winnings, we upgraded to a massive, beautiful townhouse overlooking the river. I remember standing in that huge living room, foolishly believing that all our years of bitter struggle were finally over. I didn't realize that the old cliché men turn evil when they get rich was waiting for me, inevitable and cruel. What I didn't know back then was that long before we even signed the papers for that new house, Ethan was already sleeping with Rachel, a 22-year-old intern at his logistics company. They used his fabricated business trips as cover to travel the world. He bought her $5,000 designer handbags, booked them into ultra-luxury 5-star hotel suites, and exclusively flew first class. Meanwhile, he would return home to our riverside house and scream at me for buying premium brand milk, accusing me of being financially illiterate, wasteful, and a terrible mother. His entire psychology had warped. He had a few $100,000 in his brokerage account, and suddenly he believed I, his loyal hard-working wife who had supported him through his darkest days, was a low-class burden dragging down his new, elite lifestyle. What he conveniently chose to forget was that the initial capital he used to start trading, the seed money for his entire empire, was comprised entirely of my hard-earned savings. I had skipped meals and walked miles in the snow to save subway fare just to build that nest egg. It was our joint marital asset. But greed is a demonic, insatiable thing. When the market struck absolute euphoria in 2007, Ethan completely lost his mind. He quit his stable corporate job today, trade full-time. He aggressively maxed out every credit card we owned. The lowest blow, the one I could never forgive, was when he went to my elderly mother, and using the children's future education as an excuse, manipulated her into handing over every single penny of her life savings and pension. Using this massive pool of stolen capital, he leveraged himself to the absolute limit. Through margin trading and compounding returns, by mid-2007, Ethan was a multi-millionaire on paper. Everywhere he went, people bowed and scraped, calling him Mr. Ethan, the Wall Street wizard. By late summer, the media and the analysts were screaming that the market would never go down. Swept up in the god complex of his own making, Ethan forged my signature and secretly took out a massive second mortgage on our riverside home. Every single dollar he extracted was poured back into highly volatile stocks at the absolute peak of the market. And then, the music stopped. The 2008 financial crash began its devastating ripple. In a matter of months, the market was absolutely decimated. Ethan's highly leveraged portfolio didn't just lose value. It completely evaporated into a black hole of margin calls. All the money, my mother's pension, our home's equity, the credit cards, vanished, drowning in catastrophic debt. Ethan panicked. Encouraged by Rachel, they liquidated whatever minor physical assets they had left, drained our checking accounts, and fled the country to Canada, leaving me his low-class's wife, to face the legal and financial fallout of millions of dollars in debt. In an era where average home prices were still reasonable, I woke up one morning to find myself $2 million in the red. Looking at my two young, terrified children, I had no choice. I swallowed my pride, left them in the care of my hostile mother-in-law, and quit my comfortable, low-stress government administration job. I threw myself into the brutal cutthroat world of real estate sales, baking in the summer sun and freezing in the winter winds. Luckily, while the stock market was departed, the luxury property market in New York eventually rebounded and soared. I clawed my way up from renting out dingy studio apartments to selling penthouses in Manhattan. For over a decade, I woke up before the sun and went to sleep long after midnight. I stretched every single dollar until it screamed. And miraculously, after 15 grueling years, I finally paid off the last cent of Ethan's debt. I thought I could finally breathe. I thought my life was about to get better, but I had lost my children in the process. Hunter grew up treating me like a walking ATM, viewing me with icy contempt, only uttering the word "Mom" when he needed cash for a new car or a vacation. Chloe had become a broken shell of a human being, terrified of loud noises, afraid of crowds, diagnosed by multiple doctors with severe clinical depression. And just as I was trying to pick up the pieces, Ethan, who had been missing for 15 years, suddenly returned to New York with Rachel, my mother-in-law. Martha welcomed them back with tears of joy. "Oh, you look so thin. My poor babies. Don't worry, the debt is all paid off now. You can move right back into the house and live comfortably," she had announced, her face glowing with triumph. I will never ever forget the look of absolute sickening entitlement on her face. "It's all this Jinx's fault anyway," Martha had spat, pointing at me. "It took her over a decade just to pay off a little bit of money, forcing my poor son to suffer in exile all these years." Rachel had linked arms with Martha, smugly slipping a thick heavy gold bracelet onto the old woman's wrist. "Don't worry, Mom. From now on, you and Hunter are just going to enjoy the good life with us." And Hunter, my own flesh and crimson fluid, the boy I worked my fingers to the bone to protect, stood obediently by Rachel's side, happily calling her Mommy Rachel. "Dad, Mommy Rachel, you have no idea the hell I've lived through." Hunter had sneered at me. "This old hag was never home. Who knows which men she was sleeping with all those years while you were gone. I'm kicking her out of the house today." The betrayal of my husband and the crushing weight of a $2 million debt hadn't broken me, but the knife twisted into my back by my own son completely shattered my soul. I had resolved to take Chloe and leave, to rent a tiny apartment far away. With my sales skills, I knew we wouldn't starve. But Rachel wasn't satisfied with just taking my home. She picked up a high-pressure power washer from a neighbor's driveway and aimed the blasting stream of water directly at my face. "Hey everyone, come look at this shameless whore," Rachel had screamed to the neighborhood. "She's been sleeping around on her poor husband for years." Blinded and choking on the intense spray of the water, I stumbled backward toward the street. "Stop it. One more step and I'm calling the police," I gasped. Rachel just laughed. A high piercing sound of pure malice. "Look at the fallen queen, worse than a stray dog. Just a pathetic unloved worm." Seeing me confronted, my fragile daughter Chloe snapped out of her depressive haze. She rushed forward to wrestle the power washer out of Rachel's hands. But Ethan, the man who had abandoned her for 15 years, stepped forward and intensely kicked his own daughter square in the chest. Chloe staggered backward, gasping for air, stumbling directly into the busy road. A speeding delivery truck was barreling down the street. In a surge of adrenaline, I lunged forward, grabbing Chloe's arm and intensely throwing her out of the way, taking her place on the asphalt. The impact was deafening. I was thrown through the air, my body crushed by the sheer momentum of the steel grille. As I lay losing crimson fluid out on the cold pavement, my vision dimming to black, I saw my beautiful Chloe crawling toward me, her hands covered in my crimson fluid, screaming with a raw, agonizing despair. "Mommy, Mommy, please don't leave me." Because of her severe depression, my daughter hadn't spoken the word mommy in years. Thank God. Thank whoever was listening. I made it back in time. Her life will not end in that cycle of mistreatment. Maybe even God himself felt pity for the pathetic, miserable existence I had led, because he had granted me a miracle. A second chance. Now, sitting in this brightly lit fast food restaurant in 2006, I made a silent vow. I will surgically remove the cancerous rot of this family from my life. I will throw away the chains of morality and duty that kept me trapped. For my daughter, and for myself, I am going to live a spectacular life, a cold, calculated hatred pooled in the depths of my eyes. I will make sure Ethan, Rachel, Martha, and even Hunter pay for what they did. I will make them experience the absolute terror of losing everything. As a crimson, stained sacrifice to the innocent woman who unalived on that asphalt, I snapped back to the present, watching Chloe carefully snapping her French fries in half. She was meticulously separating them into two piles, only eating the dark, slightly burnt end pieces that had fallen to the bottom of the carton. Frowning, I leaned forward. "Chloe, sweetheart, why aren't you eating the good fries?" She blinked up at me, her large dark eyes innocent and completely serious. "Grandma says I have to leave all the good things for my little brother. She says Hunter is the future of our family, and I have to think about him every single second of the day. If I give him the best things, Daddy and Grandma will be happy." I froze, the air leaving my lungs. A sharp, acidic pain flooded my chest. My beautiful daughter was only 5 years old. At 5, she was already deeply infected by my mother-in-law's toxic, patriarchal brainwashing. Subtly, day by day, she was being trained to completely erase her own desires and identity in service to a male heir. I reached out and pushed the pile of perfectly golden, crispy fries toward her. "Chloe, eat these. Today everything on this table belongs to you. We are not taking a single crumb home to your brother." Her eyes widened, lighting up with a mixture of shock and sheer delight. "Really? Can I keep the little plastic toy from the box too?" I nodded solemnly, my heart breaking at how little it took to make her happy. "When we finish here," I said softly, "Mommy is going to take you to visit Grandma Eleanor. Do you like visiting Mommy's mom?" "I love Grandma Eleanor the most," Chloe beamed, swinging her little legs under the table. "She always lets me wear pretty princess dresses. And she braids my hair so beautifully. Well, she used to, before Grandma Martha cut all my braids off." My eyes immediately burned with unshed tears. My mother-in-law had always complained that taking care of Chloe's long, silky hair was a waste of time. One afternoon, while Chloe was taking a nap, Martha secretly took a pair of kitchen shears and hacked off my daughter's beautiful hair, leaving her with a jagged, uneven buzz cut that made her look like a neglected little boy. When Chloe woke up and saw herself in the mirror, she cried so hard she threw up. My heart shattered into pieces that day. And Hunter, he just stood beside her, clapping his hands and laughing hysterically. "Little Baldy, my sister is a little bald freak. You look so ugly," he had cheered. That was the very first time I had ever struck my son. I had grabbed his arm and clapped his backside hard. "That is your sister. You are supposed to protect her, not mock her. Have you entirely lost your humanity?" I had screamed. Hunter had howled in pain, crying out, "Grandma says, because I'm the boy, the stupid girl is supposed to let me do whatever I want." It was true. The moment Martha moved into our home, Chloe went from being a cherished sibling to a second-class citizen. According to Martha's twisted logic, a sister's only purpose was to serve and yield to her brother. When Martha had seen me strike Hunter, she threw herself onto the floor, clapping her own thighs and wailing at the top of her lungs like a professional mourner. Oh, the injustice. I am an old woman, mistreated by my evil daughter-in-law. I only cut the girl's hair because the weather was getting hot. And I was terrified she'd get lice. What crime have I committed to deserve such cruelty? Ethan, forever the dutiful blind son, immediately took her side. His father back in rural Ohio was an intense alcoholic who frequently trounced Martha when he was drunk. Ethan felt immense pity for his mother, which was why he suggested moving her to New York to help with the kids in the first place, to rescue her from the domestic mistreatment. Knowing the horrific confrontations Martha used to endure, my heart had softened, and I agreed to let her stay. But I never imagined that the timid, quiet woman I met before my wedding would transform into a manipulative tyrant the moment she unpacked her bags in my house. It took me years to finally understand the truth. It wasn't just my father-in-law's fault. Martha possessed an incredibly toxic, antagonistic personality that practically invited conflict. But she was a masterful actress. Whenever the neighbors were around, she would link her arm through mine, loudly praising me to the heavens, boasting about what a wonderful daughter-in-law I was. It was the perfect trap. It left me entirely unable to complain about her without sounding like an ungrateful monster. Her public act was so flawless that 15 years later, when Ethan fled the country with the stolen money, the neighbors actually came to my door to lecture me. "Your mother-in-law has been so good to you all these years. You can't just abandon her and the boy to run away from the debt. You have to step up," they had said. To hell with them. As long as I abandon my own moral compass, absolutely no one can emotionally blackmail me ever again. I choked back my tears and gently stroked the jagged ends of Chloe's ruined hair. "Don't worry, sweetie. Grandma Eleanor loves you exactly the way you are. She will only tell you how incredibly beautiful you look." I hailed a yellow cab, and 30 minutes later, Chloe and I arrived at my mother's small modest house in Queens. I'm coming. Who is at the door?" My mother Eleanor's voice carried down the hallway before she even turned the lock. It was a strong, healthy, vibrant voice, full of life and energy. Tears immediately welled up, threatening to spill over my eyelashes. It felt like an eternity since I had last seen my mother alive. In my previous life, seeing me drowning in Ethan's $2 million debt, my mother's heart had broken for me. Without telling me, she sold this very house, the only home she had left, and used every penny to pay off a fraction of my creditors to keep the mafia-linked debt collectors away from my door. She packed her bags and moved out of state to live with my Aunt Susan, completely dependent on the charity of relatives. In her final years, she was plagued by guilt and illness. She constantly blamed herself for not stepping in earlier, for not urging me to ignore the moral blackmail of Ethan's family. She wished she had forced me to walk away from the debt, take my children, and start over no matter how poor we would be. She believed she should have told me that as long as we were together, nothing else mattered. By the time the New York housing market exploded, making it impossible for her to ever afford moving back to the city, her health had rapidly deteriorated. She passed away far from home, her dying breath filled with regret over her inability to save her useless daughter from a life of misery. That was her greatest regret, and my most unforgivable sin. "Mom," I choked out. The heavy wooden door swung open. My mother stood there in her worn floral apron, holding a wooden cooking spatula. I practically threw myself at her, wrapping her in a desperate bone-crushing hug. Seeing my reaction, Chloe instantly mimicked me, wrapping her little arms around my mother's leg and looking up with a bright smile. "Grandma Eleanor, well, what a surprise. Why didn't you tell me you were coming? Where is Ethan? Where is Hunter?" my mother asked, her smile faltering as she noticed my crimson, tinted eyes and trembling shoulders. Her maternal instincts immediately kicked in, and her expression hardened. She pulled me inside the hallway and gently shooed Chloe into the sunroom to play with the golden retriever. "Joanna, what is going on? Did someone hurt you? Did they bully you again?" she demanded, her voice dropping to a serious whisper. My mother had never liked Martha. She always saw right through my mother-in-law's act, calling her petty, narrow-minded, and cheap. When Ethan and I got married, his family didn't offer a single cent to help with the wedding, nor did they buy the traditional gold jewelry for the bride. My mother had warned me constantly, "If you marry into a family that disrespects you like this, you will eat nothing but bitterness for the rest of your life." Back then, I was blinded by a naive, foolish idea of love. I thought my mother was just being a snob, looking down on Ethan because he came from a poor rural background. But time is the ultimate truth-teller, and older generations usually know exactly what they are talking about. No, Mom, I lied softly, wiping my eyes. I really missed you. Eleanor didn't buy it for a second. She crossed her arms, her piercing gaze scanning my face as I nervously twisted the hem of my shirt, a nervous habit I've had since childhood. Joanna, you've been a quiet, passive girl since the day you were born. You swallow your grievances and you never ever complain, let alone randomly show up at my door crying that you missed me. If the sky is falling, you tell me right now. I am your mother. I stepped forward and hugged her around the waist, pressing my cheek against her shoulder. She knew me better than I knew myself. It felt so incredibly good to have a mother again. Mom, I said, my voice steadying. In the next few days, Ethan is going to come to you asking to borrow money. Under no circumstances are you to give him a single dime. Promise me. She stiffened. Why? What happened between you two? I pulled back and looked her departed in the eye. He is having an affair. I am going to divorce him. Eleanor's jaw tightened. She didn't scream. She didn't gasp. She simply pressed her lips into a thin, furious line, turned around, and marched into her bedroom without a word. I followed her nervously, my heart pounding, wondering if I had shocked her too much. But a moment later, she turned back around and shoved a worn red bank book into my hands. Take this, she commanded fiercely. If you've decided to divorce that piece of trash, you need to move fast. Hire the best shark of a lawyer you can find, rent a safe apartment, and fight like hell for full custody of both children. She didn't even ask me for proof. She didn't ask a single why. I looked down at the red bank book. It felt as heavy as a mountain in my hands. The balance printed inside was exactly $40,000. It contained the entire insurance payout from my father's terminal car crash years ago, along with every penny of her retirement savings. Mom, I can't take your money. I don't want it. I have my own, I said, trying to push it back to her. Oh, please don't lie to me, Joanna. I know exactly what your bank account looks like. You've drained every cent of your own savings subsidizing that ungrateful family of his. She scoffed. I thought of the pathetic $500 balance in my checking account, and wisely kept my mouth shut. But then, an electric spark of inspiration struck me. I gripped my mother's hands tightly. Mom, you need to come with me right now. There is somewhere we have to go. In order to execute my revenge and make sure I never ended up as the desperate, debt-ridden slave I was in my past life. The absolute first thing I had to solve was capital. I needed money, and I needed it immediately. After we got married, Ethan had played the devoted son, handing his entire salary over to his mother to give her a sense of security. We survived entirely on my meager public sector salary. And if Eleanor hadn't secretly slipped me cash every month, I wouldn't have even had $500 to my name. I walked next door and dropped Chloe off with Mrs. Higgins, a kind elderly neighbor who adored her. Then, Eleanor and I took a cab straight to the financial district. The brokerage firm was absolute chaos. The lobby was packed shoulder to shoulder with frantic, yelling day traders, their eyes glued to the scrolling red and green tickers on the massive screens above. Back in 2006, opening a high-tier trading account often required doing it in person at a physical branch. When the floor manager saw the $40,000 cashier's check in my mother's hand, his tired eyes lit up, and the deep wrinkles around his eyes folded into a greedy, welcoming smile. Right this way, ladies. VIP treatment for you. How much are we looking to invest today? He asked smoothly. Although the market was heating up in late 2006, most average citizens were still sitting on the sidelines, too scared to commit. I waved my hand dismissively. All of it, put every single cent into the market. Open the account in my mother's name. Eleanor gasped, her fingernails digging into my wrist. Are you insane, Joanna? She hissed in a panic. I leaned in close, my voice low and radiating absolute certainty. Mom, you have to trust me on this. Keep this account safe. I promise you, within 2 years I will make you a millionaire. The terrifying, unblinking intensity in my eyes must have stunned her, because her grip slowly loosened. Your brain is broken, she muttered under her breath. shaking her head. Once the manager finished the mountain of paperwork, I let out a long, shuddering sigh of relief. Eleanor sat in the plush leather chair, staring at the printed confirmation receipt, as if it were an alien artifact. Without hesitation, I marched to the trading terminal and dumped the entire $40,000 into a company called Atlantic Shipbuilding. I bought in at exactly $1.2 a share. Over the next 12 months, fueled by a massive government contract and the peak of the bubble, that exact stock was going to soar to $77 a share. That $40,000 was going to transform into nearly $2.5 million. And more importantly, by tying up my mother's cash securely in her own name, I had completely cut off Ethan's primary source of funding. Without my mother's pension to leverage, I wanted to see exactly how he planned to snowball his trades and become the legendary Mr. Ethan. Suddenly, the bulky Nokia cell phone in my purse began ringing intensely. I flipped it open, and Martha's screeching voice immediately assaulted my eardrum. "Joanna, I told you to make dinner. Where the hell are you? Are you trying to starve your family to departure?" In the background, I could hear Hunter chanting like a spoiled brat. "The old witch is trying to starve me. I'm hungry." Then, Ethan's smooth, arrogant voice cut through the noise. "Joanna, just come home. Hunter is crying because he is so hungry." I took a deep breath, pinched my thigh hard to force the tears, and immediately burst into loud hysterical sobs. "Oh, Ethan. Thank God you called." I wailed into the receiver. "It is a disaster. My mother just collapsed. I am at the hospital right now, and the ER is demanding a deposit. Please, transfer me $1,500 immediately. It is an absolute emergency." "What?" Ethan snapped, his tone instantly turning icy. "Are you out of your mind? You think $1,500 just grows on trees? What about that massive insurance payout your mother got from your dad's accident? Where is her money?" The second money was mentioned, Ethan retreated, clearly handing the phone back to his mother to do the dirty work. "She lost it," I cried, making my voice sound frantic. "She put it all into a private investment fund, and she went to check on it today, and the broker had vanished. The police said it was a Ponzi scheme." The shock gave her a heart confrontation. "Ethan, please, send the money." "Wait, your mother is broke?" Ethan asked, his voice suddenly hollow. "Yes, completely bankrupt. Please hurry, she needs treatment," I pleaded. There was a long, awkward silence on the other end. "Look, Joanna, my money is all tied up in the market right now. Why don't you call your Aunt Susan, or your uncle? Borrow it from them." I wailed louder, ensuring the entire brokerage lobby could hear me. "But you just told me this morning, you made hundreds of dollars. You said we were going to be rich. This is a matter of life and departure." "I can't," he hissed. "That stock is in a massive rally. If I pull out now, I lose thousands in potential gains. Best I can do is wire you $50. You'll have to figure the rest out yourself." I lowered the phone slightly, a cold, mocking smirk spreading across my lips. What an absolute fool I was in my past life, blind to the grotesque selfishness of this man. Through the static of the speaker, I could hear Martha whispering venomously to her grandson. "Hunter, cry harder. If you scream loud enough, your dad won't have to send that awful woman any of our money." Right on cue, Hunter's piercing wails erupted through the phone. "The ugly old witch is trying to steal Daddy's money. I don't want her. I want the pretty lady to be my mommy." Click. Ethan hung up the phone. Eleanor stood beside me, her face pale with horror. "Joanna, did Hunter really just say that?" The Nokia speaker was loud enough that she had heard every single word. It was a brutal reality to face. A mother's own flesh and crimson fluid, calling her an ugly witch and begging for a replacement. I already knew exactly who the pretty lady was. It was Rachel. Any lingering shred of maternal attachment I had left for that boy dissolved into ash in that exact moment. "Mom," I said, my voice eerily calm as I slipped the phone back into my purse. "Regardless of whether I catch Ethan cheating or not, when the divorce happens, I will only be able to win custody of one child." Eleanor's brow furrowed in pain. She reached out, her thumb gently wiping a stray tear from my cheek. I support whatever you decide to do, Joanna. I'm with you. I leaned into her touch, relishing the warmth of her palm. Thanks, Mom, because tomorrow, we have somewhere else to go. In exactly 6 months, I was going to be completely, entirely free. When it came to making ruthless decisions, my mother Eleanor was far more decisive than I had ever been. With a single phone call, she summoned my Aunt Susan from New Jersey and arranged for her to watch Chloe for a few days. Chloe was thrilled to see her aunt and waved goodbye to me with a bright, genuine smile. My first priority, before executing any part of my revenge, was to ensure my mother's health. In my past life, her relentless worrying about me and the grueling part-time jobs she took to help pay off Ethan's debts had completely destroyed her body. I booked a comprehensive VIP medical screening for her at a top private hospital in Manhattan. To my immense relief, the results showed that aside from some mild osteoarthritis in her knees, she was perfectly healthy. A massive weight lifted off my chest. As we left the clinic, I casually mentioned, "Mom, your townhouse has too many stairs. It is bad for your joints. A few luxury condo buildings are opening up soon. You should keep an eye on them." Eleanor nodded in agreement. "You're right, we should upgrade. Besides, by the time Chloe starts elementary school, there aren't any good public schools in this district anyway." There was no immediate rush to buy a house, especially since my personal bank account only held a few $100s. Even a master chef cannot cook without ingredients. After parting ways with my mother, I timed my commute perfectly and returned to our old rent-controlled apartment. At this exact hour every afternoon, Martha would take Hunter to the local park to socialize and show him off to the neighborhood gossips. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The apartment was a pigsty. Shoes were scattered randomly across the entryway. A massive pile of dirty grease-cake dishes festered in the kitchen sink, and foul-smelling laundry was thrown haphazardly over the living room sofa. My eye twitched involuntarily. In the past, my ingrained subservience would have forced me to immediately start scrubbing and organizing, but now, it wasn't my problem. I had abandoned my moral high ground. And miraculously, the breath-depriving anxiety in my chest had vanished completely. I walked straight past the mess into the master bedroom and dug out my personal identification documents and the original deed to the apartment. This place was a subsidized co-op I had secured through my government job years. Before I even met Ethan, I had purchased it for a mere $80,000. And because it was a state-subsidized benefit, Ethan could put his name on the deed. I remembered Martha throwing a massive tantrum over that fact, using it as an excuse to refuse buying my wedding ring. In my previous life, Ethan had sweet-talked me into selling this place to fund our massive riverside mansion, effectively turning my premarital asset into joint marital property and tying me to his catastrophic debts. In this life, I was going to be faster, colder, and far more ruthless. Since I had begged Ethan for money on the phone yesterday, he had completely ghosted me. I called his company's front desk, pretending he had left an urgent document at home. "Oh, Mr. Ethan is out of the office," the receptionist informed me. "He took a team on a business trip to Chicago for a month." I let out a dark, cynical laugh. A busyness trip. In my past life, this was exactly the time frame when his affair with Rachel escalated into a full-blown romantic getaway. He still couldn't control his basic urges, and his absence gave me the perfect window of opportunity. I headed straight to my office and cornered Brenda, a flashy, materialistic colleague who always had an angle. I complimented her expensive blouse, and she rolled her heavily lined eyes. "You should treat yourself, Joanna. You're 30, but you dress like you're 45. Why unalive yourself working so hard?" "I don't have a choice," I sighed, playing the desperate wife. "My husband has been acting crazy lately. He's demanding I sell my apartment to fund his stock market trades, promising we'll be millionaires. Doesn't your brother want to buy a place?" Brenda paused, her perfectly drawn eyebrows shooting up. "How much are you asking? Let me be clear, if it is market rate, we aren't interested." Brenda's brother was a notoriously shady thug, who had somehow landed a job as a city zoning enforcer, Spending his days bullying local vendors. 700,000, I said quietly. Cash only up front. But I need to delay the official handover for 1 year. The apartment was a spacious 3-bedroom unit easily worth $800,000. Hearing the massive discount, Brenda's eyes lit up with predatory greed. She called her brother immediately, and they locked the deal down that very afternoon, fully believing I was a desperate idiot. I specifically chose Brenda because her family had deep, intense ties. If Ethan's family tried to squat in the apartment later, her brother's ruthless tactics would handle them perfectly. A month later, the $700,000 cash was wired directly into my mother's secure account. When Eleanor saw the balance, she almost dropped the phone, terrified I was involved in organized crime. Mom, relax. Use your free time to go house hunting. Find a luxury, high-security building. Even if it is expensive, just put the down payment on it. We'll pay it off easily. I reassured her. She laughed, calling me crazy. But the transaction was complete. I immediately submitted my resignation. My balding, kind-hearted supervisor looked at me in shock. Joanna, are you in some sort of trouble at home? He asked. He was a genuinely good man. In my past life, he had secretly slipped me $2,000 to help with Ethan's debts after I quit. Tragically, he later fell victim to the 2008 crash, losing everything and jumping from his office window. I couldn't save the whole world, but I had to try and save him. No trouble, sir. We're just moving out to the suburbs and the commute is too brutal. I lied. He smiled. I heard your husband is making a unaliving in the market. Maybe he can give me some pointers. I leaned in and looked him departed in the eye. Sir, the market is a dangerous bubble right now. If you've made profits, pull them out immediately. Real estate is safer. Please diversify your risk. He blinked, surprised by my intensity, but gave me a slow thumbs up. Makes sense. I walked out of the office a free woman. My resignation went through without a hitch. The very next day, I bought a brand new Motorola phone, with a high-definition camera, and registered a new untraceable number. I dialed Ethan's company, and asked for Rachel. Who is calling? A sickeningly sweet, high-pitched voice answered. Hello, this is FedEx, I said in a flat professional tone. We have an international package for you, but the shipping label was damaged in transit. Could you please confirm your residential address? Rachel didn't suspect a thing. Lately, she and Ethan had been completely swept up in their romance, and he had been ordering her expensive designer gifts online, constantly. Oh, just write down 16 Maple Street. Apartment 201, she chirped happily. Perfect, thank you for your cooperation, I replied, staring at the address on my notepad. I felt a wave of icy calm wash over me. My lips curled into a predator's smile. Rachel, in this life, I am going to trounce you until there is nothing left. Relying on my 15 years of brutal experience in the New York real estate market, I quickly found an available rental directly across the street from her building. It was a third-floor unit, with an unobstructed view of her living room window. I spent $10,000 in cash to hire 2 seasoned private investigators, instructing them to monitor her apartment, and Ethan, 24 hours a day. After the new year passed, I pulled Chloe out of her mediocre public daycare and enrolled her in a prestigious private kindergarten, moving permanently into my mother's house. Martha couldn't have cared less about my absence. As long as she had her precious son and her golden grandson, she was thrilled, throwing dirty looks at me on the rare occasions I stopped by to pick up mail. I ignored her completely. I spent my days eating well, sleeping deeply, and enrolling in an intense mixed martial arts and boxing gym. Now that I was unemployed, I had all the time in the world to transform my body. By early 2007, the historic bull market had officially arrived. Euphoria swept through the city like a virus. Everywhere you went, from the grocery store checkout lines to the subway platforms, people were grinning, bragging about their overnight stock gains. It was the final deafening carnival before the avalanche. Checking the crystal-clear photos sent by my private investigators, my mood soared. I took a cab to Fifth Avenue, went on a massive designer shopping spree, and treated myself to a beautiful filet mignon lunch. When I finally returned to the old apartment to grab some winter coats, I barely had my key out of the door before Martha's shrill voice echoed through the hallway. "What is wrong with you? Coming home at all hours of the day, buying all this expensive garbage. Are you out there sleeping around behind my son's back?" she shrieked. A disgusting sour smell wafted from the kitchen sink. I pinched my nose in disgust. "What is that rotting stench? It is making me sick." Martha's eyes twitched with rage. "You shameless whore, you're out there messing around with strange men." In her twisted mind, a woman putting on makeup and buying nice clothes automatically meant infidelity. Meanwhile, her precious son was literally rolling around in bed with his secretary, and he was somehow still a saint. I shot her a lazy warning glare. "I highly suggest you shut your mouth. My hands have been itching for a fight lately." Just then, Hunter charged out of his bedroom, wielding a heavy plastic toy sword. "The evil woman is back. In the name of light, I will destroy you," he screamed, swinging the weapon at my knees. Without breaking a sweat, I reached down and hoisted the 5-year-old up by his collar with one hand. Compared to my new training, his weight was nothing. He was like a tiny arrogant insect trying to stop a moving truck. I flipped him over and delivered 2 vicious stinging smacks directly to his backside. He immediately burst into hysterical tears. Martha gasped, terrified by my sudden intense altercation, and instantly resorted to her classic theatrical routine. She threw herself against the wall, wailing loudly. "There is no justice, an evil mother trouncing her own flesh and crimson fluid. I can't live like this." I stood there, completely unmoved, watching her pathetic performance, realizing her tears had zero effect. She snapped. Her eyes turned purely venomous, and she raised her hand, lunging forward to firm clap my face. I scoffed. I smoothly caught her wrist midair, twisting it just enough to make her gasp, and used my other hand to deliver 2 echoing, back-to-back firm claps across her cheeks. Martha's head snapped to the side. She stared at me, her jaw hanging open in utter disbelief. You strike Hunter, and now you dare strike me." I smiled sweetly. "That is right. Like I said, I have absolutely no morals anymore. I suggest you keep your distance, unless you want my hands to start itching again." I sat down on the sofa, crossing my legs gracefully, and watched as Martha scurried into her bedroom to grab the telephone. She was undoubtedly calling Ethan to come home and discipline his rebellious wife. In the past, the thought of his anger would have terrified me. But now, I had zero vulnerabilities. Ethan was nothing more than a clown in my circus. The exact moment Ethan kicked the front door open, my new phone vibrated. It was a fresh batch of photos from the private investigator. The high-end camera was worth every penny. The images were spectacularly crisp. They showed Ethan, tall and handsome, cupping Rachel's face in his hands, kissing her passionately against a floor-to-ceiling window. They were so eager for a midday rendezvous, they hadn't even bothered to pull the blinds down. Judging by the foul scowl on Ethan's face as he stomped into our apartment, he must have been interrupted before he could finish the deed. "Joanna, are you out of your damn mind?" he roared. "You laid your hands on my mother. Do you have a departure wish?" Ever since he realized my mother was bankrupt and had no money to lend him, he had completely dropped his gentle loving husband act. Lately, his stock portfolio was soaring, pulling in thousands of dollars a day on paper, but without a massive injection of starting capital. His profits couldn't keep up with the exorbitant speed at which Rachel burned through his cash. In my previous life, he had bought the Maple Street apartment outright in cash and gifted it to Rachel. In this life, without my mother's savings, he was forced to rent it for her. I cracked my knuckles slowly. This wasn't enough. I needed to feed his monstrous greed. I needed him to climb so high that when he finally plummeted, he would shatter into a million irreparable pieces. I wiped an imaginary tear from the corner of my eye and put on my best distressed face. "Ethan, honey, please don't be mad. I was just out buying your birthday present. That is why I was late, and the moment I walked in, your mother accused me of sleeping with other men. I was so furious. Even if she is your mother, she has no right to insult my deep, unwavering love for you. I almost vomited from the sheer cringe of my own words. Forcing myself to look at him with desperate adoration. A present? Ethan's anger paused. Where did you get the money for a present? I handed him a velvet box. He tore it open, and his eyes immediately widened with lust. Inside sat a gleaming, authentic Rolex watch, retailing at exactly $5,000. How did I know exactly what he wanted? The pie had sent me photos last week. Ethan and Rachel had been shopping, and he bought her 2 Chanel bags. They walked past a luxury watch boutique, and Ethan had stared at this exact Rolex with utter longing, but Rachel had manipulated him into leaving the store, so she could buy more shoes instead. Seeing the watch, his harsh tone vanished entirely. Joanna, this is incredibly expensive, isn't it? Of course, I nodded eagerly. It cost $5,000. Hearing the price tag, Martha exploded out of her bedroom. She charged at me, her hand raised to strike my face. You wretched curse. You still claim you aren't sleeping with rich men. Where else would you get $5,000? As she swung, I smoothly grabbed Ethan by the shoulders and yanked him directly into her path. Clap. See. Martha's heavy hand connected perfectly with Ethan's cheek. I bit the inside of my lip so hard to suppress my laughter that I tasted crimson fluid. Oh my God, Ethan, are you okay? I gasped in fake horror. This is exactly what Mom did to me. She didn't even listen to my explanation. Thank God you were here to protect me. Ethan was completely stunned by the force of his mother's blow. His perfectly styled hair was instantly ruined. De beautiful, fi beautiful, fi de-sevened. Too bad she didn't strike him twice. Mom, what the hell are you doing? Ethan yelled, rubbing his stinging face. We were just talking. Why are you throwing punches? Son, I'm just trying to protect you. You work yourself to the bone, and your useless wife goes out throwing your money away on shiny garbage. Martha cried. I didn't spend his money, I protested loudly. I earned every single penny of this myself. Martha sneered. With your pathetic little government salary. You don't even make $5,000 in 6 months. How did you earn it? By spreading your legs. I saw you getting out of a young man's car laughing just the other day. Men are incredibly hypocritical creatures. They love keeping a loyal wife at home, while chasing mistresses outside, but they will absolutely intensely explode at the mere suggestion that their wife is cheating on them. Ethan's face flushed a dark, intense purple. Joanna, are you whoring yourself out? His eyes bulged out of his head, like an ugly infuriated toad. I lowered my head, playing the wounded victim. That was my younger cousin Jimmy. I just listened to his advice, and that is how I made the money. He told me the Dow Jones was going to shatter the 10,000 mark, and that I needed to get into the market immediately. The instant he heard the word market, the murderous rage vanished from Ethan's face. Jimmy, didn't he move to London? He came back, I said excitedly. He got a job on Wall Street with a massive hedge fund. He has insider information. He guided my trades and I made $10,000 in just 1 month. It is such a shame I don't have more principal. Otherwise, I could have made millions. Seeing his skepticism, I immediately pulled out my phone and dialed Jimmy. Hey, sis, did Ethan lose his mind over the Rolex? Jimmy's voice boomed through the speaker. Jimmy, you have to tell Ethan. Tell him you helped me make this money. He thinks I'm cheating on him. I cried. Who? Ethan, back off my cousin, Jimmy said smoothly. Joanna is a saint. I saw her begging everyone for money when Aunt Eleanor was sick, and I felt bad for her. I threw her a few guaranteed tips to help her out. Hanging up, Ethan immediately stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. Baby, I am so sorry. Don't be mad. It is my mother's fault. Her brain is getting old and confused. I playfully swatted his chest. I looked up at Martha, who was seething in the corner. Mom, I know it was just a misunderstanding. To show there are no hard feelings. I bought you a gift too. I handed her a massive 100-gram pure gold bracelet. The sight of the heavy gold instantly cured Martha's anger. She beamed, slipping it onto her wrist with greedy joy. So honey, Ethan whispered, his eyes gleaming. Did Jimmy happen to mention which stocks are hot right now? Seeing the hook firmly set in his mouth, I lowered my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Jimmy said there is a massive IPO launching soon. American Lithium. It is a blue chip commodity. He said the moment it goes public, it is guaranteed to 10 times. The pre-sale allocation opens next week. Ethan's eyes darted back and forth rapidly, his brain working in overdrive. After dinner, he quietly slipped into his mother's bedroom. I pressed my ear against the doorframe, listening to them scheme. To hide his money from me, Ethan had opened his main brokerage account under Martha's name, funneling his entire salary into it. He was currently begging her to liquidate her life savings and combine it with his stash to buy into the IPO. Martha was hesitant, telling him to just start small. I smiled in the dark hallway. A wolf's appetite is never satisfied with scraps. It has to be fed slowly until it consumes everything. From that day forward, I completely transformed my image. I bought designer handbags, diamond jewelry, and outfitted Ethan in head-to-toe Armani suits. When I was in a good mood, I'd bring Martha more gold chains and buy Hunter the most expensive video games on the market. Hunter clung to my leg, calling me mommy, with sickening sweetness. We looked like the ultimate nouveau riche lottery winners. I sat Ethan down and told him a massive lie. I claimed I had secretly remortgaged my rent-controlled apartment and wired the entire lump sum directly to cousin Jimmy to secure a massive block of American Lithium pre-sale shares. Seeing my fake, extravagant wealth, Ethan began to panic. He was developing stress blisters on his lips. He was acting incredibly secretive, disappearing for days at a time. A week later, my private investigator delivered the gold mine. Desperate for liquid capital, Ethan had mistreated his position as a logistics procurement manager. He had intercepted a multi-million-dollar shipment of imported machinery for his company, swapped it out for cheap, domestic knockoffs, and pocketed the difference. To make matters worse, he had Rachel forge a fake property deed, which they used to secure a massive fraudulent collateral loan from a shady shadow banking firm. Together, they managed to pool nearly $800,000 in illicit cash. Desperate to catch up to my gains, they poured every single penny into the American Lithium IPO. He didn't dare ask cousin Jimmy for help, terrified I would discover his secret stash. When April arrived, the stock officially went public. Just as my memory predicted, it exploded. It struck consecutive upper circuit breakers for days on end, because Ethan had used such a massive amount of stolen principal. Within just 2 months, his account balance shattered the $3 million mark. If he cashed out right then, he would have been a legitimate millionaire. He could have paid off his illegal loans, replaced the company's money, and walked away rich. But greed is a ravenous demon. It is incredibly easy to go from rags to riches, but impossible to go back to rags. He and Rachel completely lost their minds, drowning in the delusion that they were invincible financial gods making hundreds of thousands a day. And that was exactly when I gathered every single high-definition photo of their sordid affair, stuffed them into my designer purse, and marched directly into Ethan's corporate headquarters. Everyone at Ethan's logistics company recognized me. Over the years I had delivered lunches, dropped off dry cleaning, and played the dutiful supportive wife at their annual corporate parties. When I pushed through the glass double doors, my face a mask of cold fury, the young receptionist immediately panicked. Thanks to my 6 months of intense mixed martial arts training, I easily sidestepped her weak attempt to block my path and marched straight into the open plan office. I spotted Rachel instantly. She was standing by the water cooler, holding court with a group of female colleagues, proudly showing off a brand new designer purse. "Oh, it is nothing special," Rachel giggled, flipping her perfectly curled hair. "My boyfriend bought it for me this weekend. It was only $3,000. Wow, your boyfriend must be incredibly successful. Is he a CEO? One of the younger girls gasped in envy. Rachel preened. "He does all right. He easily makes $10,000 or $20,000 a day in the market right now." I have never wanted to be a screeching, unhinged woman making a public scene. But there is an undeniable intoxicating thrill that comes with abandoning all dignity and letting your righteous rage completely take over. Without saying a single word, I closed the distance, reached out and grabbed a massive fistful of her thick styled hair. Honestly, Someone should really warn mistresses not to wear their hair down. It makes it far too easy for the legal wife to grab a hold of them. Rachel let out a piercing, agonizing shriek, her body jerking backward as I pulled. "Who is that? Let go of me! Security!" she screamed, but the moment she spun around and recognized my face, the bravado vanished from her eyes. She shrank back like a terrified quail. Joanna, what are you doing here?" I didn't waste my breath talking. I shoved her hard, sending her tumbling onto the carpeted floor. Standing over her, I unleashed a flurry of vicious, open-handed firm claps across her meticulously contoured face. Left, right. I had swallowed my pride and endured a lifetime of suffering in my previous life. Now, I was finally releasing every ounce of bitterness, anger, and pain directly onto her. 5 or 6 consecutive firm claps echoed through the silent office. And within seconds, her pretty face was swollen and flushed a bright, ugly red. "If you're going to sleep with another woman's husband, you should be prepared for the day she comes to collect the debt," I snarled, my voice dripping with venom. I had deliberately held off on divorcing Ethan for half a year, just so I could exercise my legal right, as his wife, to publicly humiliate them. "I'll tear your home-wrecking face to pieces today. Let's see how many married men you can seduce looking like a swollen tomato," I threatened, raising my hand again. Not a single one of her coworkers stepped forward to help her. "Wait, isn't that Mr. Ethan's wife? I recognize her." I always knew Rachel and the procurement manager had something dirty going on, a woman whispered loudly. "I knew it. How else could a 22-year-old intern afford a $3,000 bag?" Another scoffed, calling him her boyfriend, when he is legally married. "Disgusting. She is a disgrace to women," someone else muttered. The vicious office gossip acted like a barrage of invisible knives, piercing straight through Rachel's fragile ego. She began weeping pathetically. "I didn't. Ethan and I are in love. He told me he has absolutely no feelings for you anymore, that you two sleep in separate bedrooms. He said he loves me, and he is divorcing you to marry me." "Divorce me, to marry you?" I laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "We have 2 children together. What the hell makes you think you matter? You are nothing but a cheap, disposable toy he bought to pass the time." A flicker of desperate triumph flashed in Rachel's tear-filled eyes. "A toy? Well, I'm pregnant with his child. You are going to be thrown out onto the street like the trash you are." That was exactly the confession I was waiting for. Ethan was clearly in his office just down the hall, but the coward had locked his door, acting like a turtle hiding in its shell, leaving his young mistress to face the wrath of the entire office alone. Finally, a few minutes later, the company's CEO, looking absolutely furious, marched down the hall and dragged Ethan out of his office by his collar, shoving us all into the glass-walled conference room. The moment the door clicked shut, my entire demeanor flipped. The vicious fighter vanished. I forced tears to stream down my face, letting my carefully applied makeup smudge. I ruffled my own hair to look unkempt and victimized. With the CEO and the senior management watching, I launched into a hysterical, heartbreaking monologue, laying bare every single sacrifice I had made for this man. "Ethan, how could you do this to me?" I wailed. "When we were in college, you were so poor you could only afford a 50-cent bowl of plain rice. I split my meals with you every single day so you wouldn't starve. When you graduated, you were a nobody from a rural town with no connections. It was me who swallowed my pride and begged my uncle to pull strings to get you a job." I pointed a trembling finger at his face. "When we got married, you cried about being broke. I didn't ask for a diamond ring. I didn't ask for a wedding ceremony. I married you just because I believed in your work ethic. And after we got married, you demanded a child. But the day I came home from the hospital, your mother screamed at me for eating a single piece of chicken, calling me a wasteful parasite. Have you ever seen a wasteful wife whose biggest luxury is eating a single piece of chicken?" I took a deep, shuddering breath, ensuring my voice carried through the glass walls. "And now that you finally have a little bit of money, you take our joint marital assets to buy luxury bags for a mistress, while I was out buying you a $5,000 Rolex and buying your mother solid gold bracelets. This is how you repay me." I intensely ripped the mask of the sophisticated, successful, Mr. Ethan right off his face. I wanted to see exactly how this narcissistic, ego-driven man would handle being exposed as a broke, ungrateful parasite. Shut up, Joanna. Ethan roared, his face turning an apocalyptic shade of purple. Don't act like a few cheap favors. Mean I owe you my life. You always looked down on me. You always thought I was beneath you. Well, look at me now. I am richer than you will ever be. And I am divorcing you. He grabbed a heavy crystal ashtray off the conference table and hurled it intensely at my head. I easily dodged it. It shattered against the wall, completely losing whatever remained of his gentle professional persona. Ethan lunged across the room, raising his fist to strike me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Rachel smirking from the corner. I smiled inwardly. For the past 6 months, I had spent 3 hours every single day at the boxing gym. I had trained to the point where I could reliably pin my professional instructor to the mat. All of that sweat and pain was specifically for this exact moment. Under the law, a physical altercation between spouses is classified as a domestic dispute, which police notoriously hate interfering with. Since he confronted first, in front of a dozen witnesses, I was about to execute a perfectly legal, brutal physical confrontation. In a split second, I dropped my center of gravity, ducked under his wild swing, and drove my knee ruthlessly into his floating ribs. Ethan gasped, the air knocked out of his lungs, but fueled by pure adrenaline and the inherent physical confidence of a man, he charged at me again. You crazy bitch. I am your husband. How dare you strike me? A left hook to the jaw. A brutal strike to the solar plexus. I unleashed a practiced, devastating combination, specifically targeting the soft tissues and nerve clusters that hurt the most but left the least visible bruising. To the executives watching outside, it just looked like a messy, chaotic husband and wife scuffle. But in reality, it was a one-sided slaughter, waiting for the perfect opening. I deliberately left my left cheek exposed. Ethan's palm connected with a stinging firm clap. The moment he struck me, I seized his wrist in a vice grip, pivoted my hips, and executed a flawless judo shoulder throw. He flew through the air and crashed down onto the heavy glass conference table. Sebang. So, the table didn't break, but the sound of his spine striking the glass was deafening. Before he could even register the pain, I delivered a vicious, precise hand chop directly to his groin. If he couldn't control his disgusting urges, then it was best to permanently disable the equipment. The chaotic scene finally ended. Rachel, utterly terrified by my sheer brutality, collapsed into the corner of the room, sobbing hysterically. Joanna, I'm sorry, please don't strike me, she begged, her legs giving out. The CEO eventually called 911. When the NYPD officers arrived, they found an absolute disaster zone. Ethan was curled into the fetal position on the floor, groaning in agonizing pain. I, on the other hand, looked like the tragic victim. My hair was a bird's nest. The right side of my face was swollen red from his one successful firm clap, and my lipstick was smeared all the way across my cheek. I looked far more battered than he did, given the intensity of the scene. The officers escorted all of us to the nearest hospital for an evaluation. I shrugged and followed them willingly. Rachel practically carried Ethan to the ambulance, screaming, "This is aggravated physical altercation. We are pressing charges. We're suing her." However, after a full battery of X-rays and exams, the doctors concluded that aside from some severe groin trauma, Ethan didn't have a single broken bone or laceration. Instead, the entire hospital staff quickly learned the juicy context. A cheating husband and his pregnant mistress had double-teamed the poor, devoted wife. The spectacle had already been recorded by several employees and uploaded to online forums, going viral locally. It was a shame smartphones and TikTok weren't fully mainstream yet. Otherwise, their faces would have been permanently ruined on the internet. The precinct captain finally sat us down to give his ruling. This is a classic mutual domestic dispute. No severe injuries, no weapons. I'm issuing a verbal warning to both parties, the officer stated flatly. Rachel was furious. She trounces us half to departure. I demand financial compensation for my medical bills. The officer shot her a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. Lady, considering you're actively destroying this woman's family and violating public decency, I strongly suggest you just apologize to Mrs. Joanna and walk away. Tears welling in her eyes, Rachel practically choked on her own pride as she muttered, "I'm sorry." I leaned back in my chair, stretching my arms lazily. Apology rejected. While still sitting inside the police precinct, I made 2 phone calls. 30 minutes later, my high-powered divorce attorney and 2 towering private security guards walked through the front doors. With a dozen police officers as my witnesses, I formally presented Ethan with the divorce papers. Ethan picked up the heavily redacted legal document, his eyes scanning the demands. Suddenly, his head snapped up, his eyes bulging with rage. You knew this whole time." "Knew what?" I asked innocently. "That you were cheating on me, or that you were illegally transferring our marital assets into hidden accounts. You played me," he hissed, slamming his fist on the table. "Who played who, Ethan?" I shot back, my voice turning ice cold. "You transferred hundreds of thousands of dollars of joint marital funds to your mother. You established a long-term, illicit relationship with a third party, presenting yourselves to the world as husband and wife." I shifted my gaze pointedly toward Rachel's stomach, and thanks to that factual piece of biological evidence growing inside her, my lawyer here has enough grounds to have you indicted for criminal bigamy and marital fraud. Hearing the threat of prison, Rachel let out a whimpering gasp and curled her arms protectively over her belly, hiding behind Ethan's chair. "What exactly do you want?" Ethan asked. His teeth gritted so hard I thought they might shatter. I smiled warmly at them. Watching these 2 arrogant parasites squirm in a police station brought a profound, therapeutic joy to my soul. "It is simple. We split the marital assets 60-40. I take 60%. You take 40%. As for the children, I get full, undivided legal and physical custody of Chloe. You can keep Hunter. And finally, every single dollar you spent on luxury gifts, hotel rooms, and dinners for your little mistress came from our joint marital funds. You owe me exactly half the cash value of all those expenditures. I want it paid in a lump sum." I nudged the thick stack of financial documents across the table. "If you want to drag this out in court, go ahead. My lawyer gets paid by the hour, and I have all the time in the world to freeze your brokerage accounts while we wait for a judge." I turned back to Rachel, clicking my tongue sympathetically. "Such a pity. If he goes to prison, your baby is going to be born a bastard to a convicted felon. You'll be wearing that scarlet letter for the rest of your miserable life." Rachel, terrified of becoming a social pariah and losing her meal ticket, intensely shook Ethan's arm. "Ethan, just sign it. We are rich now. We have millions in the market. Just pay her off, so we can get married and be free." She was right about one thing, they did have money. Between the massive fraudulent loans, the embezzled company cash, and the massive leverage in American Lithium, they were sitting on millions. But half of that money was technically parked in Martha's bank account, and the other half was in an offshore account Rachel controlled. Legally, I couldn't easily access those specific hidden funds during a swift divorce without a multi-year legal battle, but I didn't need their dirty money. I just needed to bleed his liquid cash dry. "Fine. I'll sign the damn papers." Ethan spat, shifting uncomfortably in his plastic chair. The physical trauma I inflicted on his groin earlier was clearly still throbbing. My lawyer immediately produced a comprehensive breakdown of our verifiable joint marital assets. Ethan's official bank account only had about $10,000 in cash and a few minor investments. The vast majority of our joint money had allegedly been spent on Rachel over the past year. "Wait a second," Ethan growled, scanning the spreadsheet. "Where is your money? Where is the $700,000 from the apartment sale?" I blinked, my eyes wide and entirely innocent. "Oh honey, I spent it on you. I bought you that gorgeous Rolex, and I bought your mother all those massive solid gold bracelets, remember? The receipts are all right here. Under New York state law, those aren't considered exclusive gifts. They are classified as marital property purchased with joint funds. Watching his face turn the color of a discolored eggplant was the highlight of my decade. I almost burst out laughing. I silently thanked Rachel for being such a materialistic gold digger. In a standard divorce, fighting over our meager official bank accounts, I would have walked away with barely $20,000. But because my investigators proved Ethan had squandered nearly $100,000 on Rachel's luxury lifestyle, I was legally entitled to $50,000 in cash reimbursement, combined with my 60% split of the remaining minor assets. He owed me nearly $60,000 in raw liquid cash. What a fantastic setup. Absorbing a cheating husband actually generated a profit. Desperate to get rid of me, and terrified of a criminal bigamy investigation, Ethan was forced to log into his brokerage account right there in the precinct. He had to forcefully liquidate a massive block of his highly profitable American lithium shares, absorbing a massive short-term capital gains tax penalty, just to wire the cash into my account before the end of the month. The moment the massive wire transfer cleared in my bank account, I didn't waste a single second. I dragged Ethan straight to City Hall to finalize the absolute decree of divorce. I arrived flanked by my 2 hulking security guards. Ethan showed up with Rachel clinging to his arm. Under the strange judgmental stares of the clerks and security personnel, I formally severed my legal ties to the man who had ruined my previous life. Staring down at the cold hard divorce certificate in my hands, I let out a long shuddering breath. A massive breath-depriving chain had just been broken. In this lifetime, I would never ever be emotionally blackmailed or financially enslaved by this parasite again. Rachel, mistaking my quiet relief for sorrow, strutted up to me, pulling Ethan tightly against her chest. She looked at me with smug, triumphant eyes. You probably don't know this, but Ethan's stock portfolio has quadrupled in the last 2 weeks. If you beg us nicely, maybe we'll throw you a bone and recommend a few penny stocks for you to buy. With your little divorce settlement. I looked her up and down, a cold mocking smirk spreading across my face. He's practically a multi-millionaire now, Rachel. If you don't lock him down with a wedding ring immediately, what happens if he dumps you for a younger, prettier intern? You'll lose the baby, the money, and your dignity. That would be a real tragedy, wouldn't it? A man who is fundamentally disloyal to his marriage is a man with zero moral baseline. He is garbage. He will betray his mistress just as easily as he betrayed his wife. My words strike a raw nerve. I saw Rachel's manicured fingers dig painfully into Ethan's bicep. I gestured lazily toward the City Hall Marriage Bureau counter down the hall. Hey, you already have your identification documents on you today. Why don't you guys just go grab a marriage license right now? I stood there, leaning against the marble pillar, watching them like they were monkeys in a zoo exhibit. Unable to handle my blatant mockery, and terrified that Ethan might actually get cold feet. Rachel threw a massive tantrum right there in the lobby, crying and screaming until Ethan reluctantly agreed to pull a ticket and get in line for a marriage license. Watching them walk away with their fresh new marriage certificate, I gave them a slow, sarcastic round of applause. A whore and a dog bound together for eternity. I wish you nothing but the absolute worst. I walked out of the heavy brass doors of City Hall into the bright New York sunshine. A cherry red Porsche 911 pulled up to the curb, the engine roaring loudly. The tinted window rolled down, revealing my younger cousin, Jimmy, wearing designer sunglasses. Hey sis, congratulations on your rebirth, Jimmy cheered, tossing a massive bouquet of dark red roses into my arms. I threw my bag into the passenger seat and climbed in, leaving Ethan and Rachel staring at the sports car in absolute venomous jealousy. We sped off down the avenue, the wind whipping through my hair. Sis, I gotta be honest, Jimmy yelled over the engine noise. Letting those scumbags keep the $5,000 Rolex and all that solid gold, that was way too generous. You took a massive loss on that. I leaned back against the leather seat, a sharp, brilliant laugh escaping my lips. Jimmy, do you honestly think I'm an idiot? Every single one of those gifts was completely fake. I wouldn't waste a single penny of real money on those animals. I wasn't stupid. The Rolex was a high-tier replica I bought in Chinatown for $100. The designer bags were knockoffs, And the solid gold bracelets I gave Martha were cheap, brass-plated in a microscopic layer of gold foil. The whole charade cost me maybe $500 total. But those cheap props were the perfect bait to convince Ethan that I had struck it rich, pushing his greed into overdrive. It was the perfect trap, and soon, the massive American lithium bubble was going to teach them exactly how brutal the real world could be. I listened to everything you said, sis, Jimmy said, his tone turning serious. I liquidated my entire stock portfolio last week, right before the fourth quarter. I made a unaliving millions in profit. So, what's our next move? How do you feel about partnering up and starting a high-end real estate brokerage? I asked, looking out at the towering Manhattan skyline. The historic 2007 bull market was on the verge of a catastrophic collapse. But I knew for a fact that the New York luxury real estate market was about to experience a massive, unprecedented golden era of growth. If you say so, sis, I'm all in. You haven't been wrong yet, Jimmy grinned. No, I thought to myself, staring at my reflection in the side mirror. I was wrong once. I made the biggest mistake of my life, but this time, I accepted the universe's ultimate gift of a second chance. And I wasn't going to waste a single second of it. Over the course of the next year, my life completely transformed. The initial $40,000 my mother had invested in Atlantic Shipbuilding proved to be the golden ticket. Just as I had remembered, the stock experienced an astronomical rally. I slowly liquidated our positions. When the share price struck its absolute peak, cashing out nearly $2.5 million in pure profit. Before the New Year strike, my mother officially sold her modest Queens house, walking away with over $1 million in cash. Trusting my judgment completely, she handed the funds over to me, and I strategically fed them back into the roaring 2007 bull market. The year 2007 was a financial fever dream. You could practically close your eyes, throw a dart at the stock ticker, and make money. It wasn't a question of if a stock would rise, but rather how many multiples it would jump. Though my technical knowledge of the market was limited, I strictly purchased the few skyrocketing blue chip stocks I remembered dominating the news headlines in my previous life. By October, right before the catastrophic subprime mortgage crisis began to show its teeth, I ruthlessly liquidated every single asset we had in the market. When the final wire transfers cleared, the balance in my mother's offshore and domestic accounts was sitting at a staggering $50 million. Overnight, I had become an ultra-wealthy, independent woman, staring at the 8-figure balance on the bank screen. My mother broke down in tears of pure relief. That weekend, she dragged me to St. Patrick's Cathedral in the heart of Manhattan. We knelt in the pews, bowing our heads in sincere gratitude to whatever divine force had given me this miraculous second chance. We made a massive anonymous donation to the church's charity fund, and I set up a private trust to fully sponsor the college tuitions of 10 underprivileged, at-risk high school girls. Wealth must be balanced with benevolence. A heart must always lean toward kindness. My mother had never experienced this kind of financial freedom in her entire life. She called my Aunt Susan, and together with little Chloe, the three of them spent their days being chauffeured around New York's most exclusive neighborhoods in a private black car. They toured penthouses, historic brownstones, and sprawling estates. I gave them total creative control. It didn't matter where we bought, as long as our family was safely under one roof. It would be a perfect home. One crisp autumn afternoon, I found some free time and decided to take a trip back to my old rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn. The grace period was over, and the apartment officially needed to be handed over to Brenda's brother, the ruthless city enforcer. I assumed the place would be completely empty. When Ethan and I finalized the divorce, we had signed a binding agreement stating he would clear out his family's belongings immediately. But when I pushed the front door open, the stench of cheap liquor and unwashed bodies struck me like a physical blow. Sitting at the dining table, cracking peanuts and chugging from a bottle of cheap vodka, was my former father-in-law, Arthur, and kneeling on the living room floor, her hair a tangled, greasy mess, aggressively picking up trash, was my previously arrogant, untouchable mother-in-law, Martha. Her face was a horrific canvas of dark purple discolorations, and swollen welts. Hearing the door open, the two of them froze. Martha looked up, her eyes wide with terror, and instinctively covered her discolored face with her hands. Joanna, she whimpered quietly. Arthur, his face flushed red from the alcohol, slammed his bottle on the table and slurred aggressively. Who the hell are you? Get the hell out of my house. I calmly pulled the finalized real estate transfer documents from my designer bag and dropped them onto the table. This apartment was legally sold months ago. Today is the final handover date. It is time for you to pack your trash and get out. Arthur's crimson-tinted eyes darted from the contract to Martha. He stood up, stumbled across the room, and viciously kicked Martha directly in the back of the knee. You lied to me, you stupid bitch, he roared, right there in front of me. A intense, chaotic brawl erupted as they screamed and tore at each other. The pathetic truth of their situation spilled out. Arthur's decrepit trailer back in rural Ohio had been destroyed in a severe flash flood. With nowhere to go, he stuffed his belongings into garbage bags and took a Greyhound bus to New York to find his rich son. He had wandered into the local park and found Martha happily dancing with the neighborhood retirees. Furious that she was living a life of leisure while he was homeless, he marched right up, clapped her across the face in front of everyone, and dragged her back by her hair. Rachel, who was currently playing the role of the wealthy, pregnant socialite, absolutely despised Arthur's drunken, hillbilly demeanor. Not wanting an intense alcoholic ruining her new luxury rental, she manipulated Ethan into permanently kicking both his parents out onto the street. Homeless and desperate, Arthur and Martha had broken back into my old apartment, assuming they could squat there indefinitely. Fortunately, I had anticipated exactly this kind of parasitic behavior, which was exactly why I had sold the property to Brenda's family at a massive discount. Evil people are always eventually destroyed by people even more evil than them. I dialed Brenda's brother, and within 10 minutes, 3 massive heavily tattooed men arrived to physically throw Arthur and Martha onto the pavement. As I turned to leave the hallway, the door to the small guest bedroom creaked open. A small terrified face peeked out from the darkness. Mommy, I stopped in my tracks, my eyebrow raising in genuine surprise. How long had it been since Hunter had actually called me mommy? What is wrong? I asked coldly. I thought you didn't want an ugly old witch for a mother. I thought you had a rich, pretty new mommy now. A profound look of confusion and deep sorrow washed over his discolored, dirty face. Mommy, why did you only want my sister? Why did you leave me? Grandma always told me I was the heir, the most important person in the family. Why am I the worthless one you threw away? I crouched down, meeting his tear-filled eyes. In a mother's heart, her children should hold equal weight. But if you are forcing me to choose, yes, I chose Chloe, because I deeply love her kindness, her empathy, and her beautiful soul. You chose cruelty, Hunter. Hearing our conversation, Martha frantically scrambled up from the floor and snatched Hunter by the collar, pulling him behind her back. Joanna, don't you dare try to steal my grandson away, she hissed protectively. I tightened my lips, keeping my distance. Hunter, do you want to come with me? As his biological mother, despite the horrors of my past life, I still felt a tiny shred of obligation to steer him away from complete darkness. His massive eyes brimmed with heavy tears, and he slowly, hesitantly nodded his head. I stood up, pulled a business card from my purse, and tossed it at Arthur's feet. If you ever strike rock bottom, call that number, I said. Turning my back on the ruined family, I walked out of the building and took a deep breath of the crisp city air. When a skyscraper collapses, the children trapped inside are innocent casualties, but I could not let his toxicity infect my daughter's new life just yet. A full year later, the phone in my office rang. It was the number I had left behind. When I answered, Ethan's voice echoed through the speaker. He sounded hoarse, utterly exhausted, and aged by 20 years. Joanna, for the sake of the years we spent married, please. I need to borrow $1 million. When I remained completely silent, panic crept into his voice. No, wait, 500,000. Just 500,000 please. I don't have it, I replied coldly. 200,000, he sobbed desperately. Give me 200,000. and I will literally sell Hunter's custody rights to you. Deal, I said. I withdrew exactly $200,000 in crisp cash, packed it into a small duffel bag, and drove to the rundown motel address he gave me. The man waiting for me in the alleyway was a ghost of the arrogant Wall Street wizard I had divorced. Ethan was wearing a filthy, unwashed jacket. His once proud posture had completely collapsed, his shoulders hunched in defeat. His eyes were hollow, crimson, tinted, and wildly darting around the alley as he rubbed his trembling hands together. Hunter was squatting quietly on the dirty concrete beside him. When the boy looked up, my stomach dropped. His small arms were covered in dark, overlapping purple discolorations. Seeing me, tears immediately spilled over his eyelashes. "Mommy," he whispered hoarsely. "I'm so sorry. I was wrong." I tossed the heavy duffel bag directly at Ethan's worn-out shoes. Without looking at him, I scooped Hunter up into my arms and turned to walk back to my car. "Joanna, I am so sorry." Ethan's voice cracked with an eternity of agonizing regret behind me. "If there was any way for the sake of our two beautiful children, could we ever start over?" I didn't even bother turning my head. "This isn't a landfill, Ethan. I don't recycle garbage." On the drive back to the city, sitting safely in the heated leather passenger seat, Hunter quietly told me the horrific details of the past year. A few months after the eviction, Arthur had gotten blackout drunk. In a fit of uncontrollable, intense rage, he trounced Martha to departure with a heavy floor lamp. Domestic mistreatment was a civil tragedy, but forcible unaliving was a federal crime. Arthur was arrested on the spot and sentenced to life in a maximum security prison. With both grandparents gone, Hunter was forced to live full-time with Ethan and Rachel. Hunter had been spoiled into a monster by his grandmother, but under Rachel's ruthless, sociopathic iron fist, he was trounced into absolute submission. Because he no longer had a mother or a grandmother to protect him, he became her personal punching bag. The old saying was true. When you get a stepmother, your biological father becomes a stepfather. Rachel, trapped at home heavily pregnant, and increasingly paranoid about Ethan's collapsing finances, took all her rage out on the boy. She forced the 5-year-old to scrub floors, fetch her drinks, and cut her fruit, trouncing him mercilessly if he made a mistake. "You're nothing but a cursed jinx," she would scream at him. "You got your grandmother, unalived. What use is a son from a departed marriage? I'm going to have my own baby soon, and you are going to spend the rest of your life serving your new brother." One evening, Hunter accidentally spilled a glass of water on the hardwood floor. Enraged, Rachel lunged forward to pinch his arm, but her foot slipped on the puddle. She crashed intensely onto the ground, her massive belly taking the full force of the impact. Hunter admitted to me, his voice trembling, that he had just stood there. He watched Rachel writhe and scream in agony on the floor, losing crimson fluid out onto the expensive rug, and he intentionally did nothing. He waited until the pool of crimson fluid was massive before finally dialing 911. "Police officer, my auntie fell down," he had said. By the time Ethan frantically arrived at the emergency room, it was too late. The umbilical cord had prolapsed, and the baby deprived of breath in the womb. Because of the massive delay, Rachel's uterus had ruptured so severely that doctors were forced to perform an emergency medical procedure to save her life. She would never be able to have children again. The police reviewed the security cameras Ethan had installed in the living room. They saw Rachel's horrific pattern of child mistreatment, and the footage of her fall, because she was technically the aggressor lunging to strike a child. No charges were filed against Hunter, but Rachel's reputation was permanently, publicly destroyed, and that was exactly when the historic 2008 financial avalanche struck. Ethan's glorious days as a multi-millionaire vanished into thin air overnight. American Lithium plummeted, triggering catastrophic margin calls. The shadow banking firm he took the fraudulent loans from demanded immediate repayment. Rachel, realizing the money was entirely gone, and she was tied to a sinking ship, made a ruthless decision. Unwilling to spend the rest of her life paying off his millions in debt, she quietly pawned every single piece of jewelry and designer clothing she owned. She took the cash, seduced a wealthy private contractor, and fled the country to Las Vegas. But before she left, As a final act of vengeance for losing her uterus, she anonymously mailed a massive dossier of evidence to Ethan's logistics company, exposing his massive embezzlement and the swapped machinery. The company immediately filed a massive civil and criminal lawsuit against him. Ethan was forced to liquidate every single stock he owned at rock-bottom prices. He emptied his bank accounts, but it barely covered a tenth of the millions he had stolen and lost. He asked me for the $200,000 because he was planning to buy a fake passport and flee to South America. But the moment I drove away from that alley, I pulled out my phone and dialed the FBI tip line. Sitting in the car, Hunter pressed his discolored cheek against my leg. "Mommy, I know how evil I was. I intentionally didn't call the ambulance. I didn't want her to have a baby brother. I was a monster. But I promise, I am ready to be a good big brother to Chloe now." When the twins were born, Hunter was delivered 3 minutes earlier, making him the older brother. I gently stroked his hair. "It is okay, Mommy forgives you. Every child is born into this world as a blank canvas. If they become monsters, the blame lies entirely on the selfish, greedy adults who painted them that way." The day of Ethan's federal sentencing, I brought my high-powered attorney and sat in the front row of the public gallery. The judge showed absolutely no mercy. Ethan was found guilty of grand larceny, corporate embezzlement, and wire fraud. The sentences ran consecutively. He was sentenced to 7 years in a federal penitentiary. As the bailiffs clamped the handcuffs on his wrists, he looked out into the gallery and saw me. A desperate delusional light flared in his eyes. "Joanna, I knew it. I knew you wouldn't abandon me. You came for me." I didn't say a word. I simply nodded to my lawyer, who stepped past the wooden partition and slid a legal document onto the defense table. "Sign the paperwork, Mr. Ethan," my lawyer said coldly. "Because of your felony convictions, your children will be permanently barred from ever passing government background checks or obtaining security clearances. My client is officially stripping you of all parental rights and legally changing Hunter's last name to hers." The delusional hope in Ethan's eyes shattered instantly, replaced by a dark, endless void. His pale lips trembled intensely as his shaking fingers picked up the pen and signed his rights away. "I regret everything, God. I was so wrong," he wept. Sitting at the defense table, surrounded by armed guards, he raised his handcuffed hands and intensely clapped himself across the face. The sharp crack echoed through the silent, mahogany courtroom. I turned around and walked out the heavy oak doors, wondering what kind of cake I should buy to celebrate with my family tonight. Not long after he was transferred to the federal penitentiary, Ethan was found departed in his cell. Acute myocardial infarction. A massive heart confrontation. Perhaps in the departed of night, staring at the concrete ceiling, his heart simply exploded from the agonizing realization that if he had just sold his stocks in October, he would have been a multi-millionaire, living in a mansion with a beautiful wife, having everything a man could ever dream of. I paid for his memorial process and collected his remains. At the time, scattering remains at sea to symbolize ultimate freedom was incredibly popular. I was feeling particularly generous, so I chartered a boat and found a stunning picturesque stretch of the Atlantic Ocean, tossing his remains into the freezing waves so he could finally experience the free wind he always wanted. The following year, my mother, Chloe, and I took a lavish vacation to Las Vegas. While driving through one of the grittier, neon-lit side streets off the Strip, I saw a familiar face. It was Rachel. She was wearing cheap, torn fishnet stockings and a microscopic skirt, aggressively pulling on the jacket of a drunk tourist. "Hey asshole, we agreed on $200. Why are you shorting me a 20? She shrieked, a lit cigarette dangling from her lips. "Relax, sweetheart, I ain't got change. I'll catch you next time," the man laughed, shoving her away. Through the haze of her cigarette smoke, my mind flashed back to my previous life, to the moment she had aimed that power washer at me and laughed. Look at the fallen queen. Worse than a stray dog. Just a pathetic, unloved worm. It was incredibly poetic. She had walked the exact path of my previous life, and it turned her into exactly what she was, a streetwalker. When my son Hunter turned 8 years old, I made the hardest decision of my life. I packed his bags and sent him to a strict, highly disciplined military boarding school run by my uncle. It was the ultimate final act of kindness I could offer as his mother. Our bond had always been incredibly shallow, irreparably damaged by the past. I could only pray that the military discipline would forge him into a decent, honorable man. Finally, the renovations on my mother's real estate investments were complete. I held Chloe's small hand as we walked up the sweeping driveway of our new home. Sunlight filtered beautifully through the massive oak trees, scattering golden light across the cobblestones, tucked away in one of the most historic exclusive enclaves of the Upper East Side. It was an absolute masterpiece of architecture. My mother waved her arms dramatically, laughing with pure joy. It was practically a war zone trying to win the bidding war for this place. But our little Chloe took one look at it and fell in love. It was incredibly expensive, over $4,000 a square foot. But the house is massive. I bought Chloe 2 more luxury condos downtown too. Keeping cash in the bank is too risky. Bricks and mortar give a family real security. Oh, my brilliant mother. But honestly, Chloe was the true mastermind of this family. Thanks to my daughter's impeccable taste, we were now living in a historic mansion that would eventually be worth over $30,000 a square foot in the future. The old saying was right. Good fortune naturally gravitates toward those who possess kind hearts. I bent down and kissed Chloe's soft cheek. You are Mommy's little lucky star. Chloe wrapped her arms around my neck, her eyes shining with absolute adoration. Mommy is a phoenix rising from the remains. Mommy is my superhero. The brilliant morning sun broke through the remaining clouds, flooding the grand foyer of our mansion with spectacular, warm light. My mother was practically vibrating with the energy of a toddler. We need to put a massive curved velvet sofa right there in the corner, and the curtains should be a soft emerald green. It's supposed to be wonderful for your eyesight. Joanna, you take the master suite. Chloe will take the east wing. We are going to build her the ultimate princess room. Chloe's sweet, bright voice echoed through the massive halls. We have to make sure we leave a nice room for Hunter when he visits too. Life was beautiful. My marriage had been an absolute failure. But in the end, I had achieved the most spectacular, resounding victory.